some of the letters. Anybody got a CP 2000 that says you missed something on your return? It's computer generated. Anybody get one of those? It's easy to miss something. I mean, you didn't get something in the mail. That's all computer generated, and about 50% of those letters are inaccurate. So don't pay something that they say you owe. Their second goal, can't even find it. Look at this thing. It's their document. Enforce the law. Oh, enforce the law to ensure everyone meets their obligations to pay taxes. That's where they play tough ball. And I'll tell you folks, right now they're really enforcing the law on collections. Let me tell you what they're doing with audits though. They've got these correspondent audits now. Anybody receive a correspondence audience? Audit? Anybody? It's coming from a service center. And basically, if one of your deductions is a little higher than the national average, they're asking you to send in the documentation. It could come all the way from New York. They got 10 service centers, like I said earlier, around the country. And basically, they just want you to send these, the documentation in. It's kind of reducing the office audit, because now the office audits are really hitting the Schedule C. How many Schedule C filers do we have out here? Does anybody file a tax return out here? Wait a minute, maybe I'm, yeah, you, I think I got the wrong audience. Anyway, how many have corporations? Okay, great. That's really still a safe haven, by the way, right now. I really encourage my clients that are self-employed, Schedule C filers, to incorporate, because there's still a great tax advantage to that. But getting back to the audits, if you get a correspondence audit, it's really quite harmless. You send the information into the service center, wrap up all your documents, and usually it's a newly hired employee that's looking at that. They really don't know what they're looking at, to be honest with you, and it's pretty easy to just get by with that. If you're called into the office audit, which the closest office here is Santa Ana, and we know all the auditors over there. So remember, just remember my name, Phil Liberatore. If you ever get a letter from the IRS or you ever get audited, I'm going to be your best friend, like you said earlier. But don't ever represent yourself, because even a harmless questionnaire or even a face-to-face interview with the IRS is basically a trap. They'll ask you innocent questions. Well, how many bank accounts do you have? Oh, I got 3. What are they? The key here is the IRS basically knows nothing about you. When you get into their office or you start sending them information, you're basically opening up your own personal book. So just beware of that. I'm not even following my outline. What's next? What, who, what, when, where, why, the hows of the IRS. File away. Here's a big thing. How many's got a penalty from the IRS? Okay. Are you aware there's a penalty abatement program where you're going to actually ask for the penalty to be abated? There's all kinds of penalties right now. They're racking them up like crazy. Sometimes they're finally late, not paying your taxes on time. But you could actually ask for a penalty abatement, and all you have to simply say, if it's a reasonable cause. Now, there's got to be some kind of reason for filing late or not paying your taxes, but if it's reasonable, and if it's something that makes sense, they really are working with the taxpayers on that. If you owe the IRS some money, they're really easy about setting up installment plans. They don't mind stretching it out over a 60-month period. Itemized deductions. There's all kinds of special secrets I put in the book. There's a whole chapter on that. Audits, again, just beware of their schemes. Audit tips, don't negotiate yourself. By the way, even if you get an audit report, you can always appeal it. A lot of folks think, oh man, I'm sunk, that's it, I'm stuck. I owe them $10,000. You don't. You can always appeal it. Now at the appellate level, they want to work with you. The last thing I want to do is drag this thing out. So you can just ask for appeals, and you get an appeal officer who like to negotiate and get that thing out. The best time to collect, to make an appointment for the audit, of course, is at the end of the month, late afternoon, end of the quarter, because they got to close these cases out. Usually the average auditor's got like 50 to 60 cases that they got to work on at any one time. So I really encourage you not to I also have some information on the Bush tax cuts, what it's going to look like. First-time home buyer credits that just expired, but if you haven't filed yet, you're still eligible to receive it. Employee health insurance expense credit, and the HIRE Act, where if you're hiring somebody unemployed, you get a special credit on your payroll taxes. By the way, did everybody read the paper today? The recession's over. No, it wasn't. It's not over like today. It was over 15 months ago. You want to try telling the 15 million people that haven't worked that? And 42% of them are still, just started looking for work the last 6 months. So, you know, the economy's so bad that Motel 6 won't even keep the light on anymore. I'm telling you folks, it's really bad. Also, it's so bad I got a pre-declined credit card application in the mail. Remember we used to get those every week? And CEOs are now playing miniature golf, you know. What do you think about that? Also, if the bank returns your check, you got to call the bank. Insufficient funds, you got to find out if it's your check or if there are insufficient funds. And this is really bad, folks. The mafia just laid off 20 judges this last week. They're telling me to get out of here, so I guess I'm done. But listen, if you want to laugh, just give me a call, 877-6-SOLVER. Phil Liberatore, I am your IRS problem solver. By the way, I got a couple of my best team members with me at the table back here. Arvin Santos, he's the IRS problem solving manager. Arvin, you want to stand up? And I got Tia Williams, who's my senior associate. So see us in the back afterwards. Thank you guys, and ask me questions later. I got all kinds of answers.
All right, Phil, I wish I lived in California. I would have voted for you. Phil was actually, you left one of those jokes out. Phil, where did he go?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, right there. He left one of those, whoa. He left one of those jokes out. Phil told me earlier, he said, they told me, cheer up, it could be worse. So we cheered up and it got worse. Anyway, I'm Brian Westbury, so we've just heard Phil and Steve, and they, Thank you. And they took us, we were flying close to the ground. And what I mean by that is, I'm taking us to 30,000 feet here for the next 20, 22 minutes, and then Hugh's gonna come drill me with this question. And I almost don't, it's almost not enough time to do anything justice with the economy today. I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and I have never seen an economy with more going on than we have right now. But what I will tell you is this, people are pessimistic today, and I believe that a lot of the pessimism that people are feeling is warranted, but a great deal of it is unwarranted. I've begun to believe that people are affected by economic hypochondria. All right? Now, when I was 25, heartburn was heartburn. Now I'm 52 and I think heartburn's the big one. You know, my mother says that you gotta be brave to get old. And I didn't really know what she meant except till the last couple of years, but she's right. And I think we have to be brave to get old with our finances too. Because there's fewer days to make up losses, we get worried about things. There's no doubt that as we age as a nation, that things get a little more scary. But you know what? I think people are blowing a lot of things out of proportion. And I want to talk about some of that today. You know, an economist's job is to look at the other side of the coin. Or another way to say it is there's primary effects, that's the first one, right? We raise the minimum wage. So that, the primary effect, if that's all you ever look at, is people working for the minimum wage now get paid more. And if you stop there, you go, why not? All right, but what we get paid to do is look at the secondary and the tertiary effects. And what happens is when you raise the price of something, you get less of it. So when you raise the minimum wage, you get less employment for teenagers. And one of the worst places for unemployment today is teenage unemployment. So we get paid to look at the other side. So what I always do, in a sense, is look at the other side. So think about this. We have this BP oil spill in the Gulf. It's awful. It's terrible. By the way, before I get started here, I want you to know I wish not one drop of oil had spilled into the Gulf. But at the same time, I'm really happy that there was this plumber in California who figured out how to plug it. Did you hear about this, by the way? One of the key ideas of that final cap that went into place came from a plumber in California. This was the idea right there. They finally found a use for that place. All right? Actually, it is true. You know, plumbers work with pressure and pipes all the time. Truly, it wasn't this idea. But what I'm getting to here is, you know, we didn't know how to plug a hole 5,000 feet deep in the ocean. And now we've learned a lot. So there's a good side to this awful event. By the way, if you look at plane accidents, train accidents, coal mining accidents, automobile accidents, you look at anything in our lives, we've been getting better and better and better and better for decades. In coal mining for centuries. Everything. And so we're going to get better at drilling in the ocean. And I hope we don't stop just because we spilled some oil in the Gulf. By the way, if you want to really, the Gulf is huge, monstrous, trillions of gallons of water. The oil that spilled was the equivalent of about 1 ounce of suntan lotion in the average size swimming pool. That's why Spike Lee is mad now, because they can't find the oil. He's like, they're hiding it. Yeah, he said they're hiding it. But the fact of the matter is that we blew it all out of proportion. And I don't, you know, these computerized models that show the whole world turning black because they can't plug it. And this happens every time. People get fearful. By the way, do you remember Dubai? I don't mean remember where it is on a map. I mean, remember back in January for like 4 days, you were terrified about Dubai? Do you know why you were terrified? Do you know why you stopped being terrified? You have no idea. And I'm being generous. You have no idea why you were worried about Dubai. And you have no idea why you stopped, but you were. You know, I get people, they call me up, they go, how can the economy recover? We have 10% unemployment. You know what I answer? How can we not? It's a little zen. I figured you'd like that out here. You know, hey, I'm from Illinois, the Midwest, flyover country. You know what? It's like grasshopper. How can we not have a recovery when the unemployment's 10%? Because, by the way, every recovery I've ever seen in the history of the world started when unemployment was high. By the way, every recession started when the unemployment rate was low. So you know when to buy stocks? You buy stocks when the unemployment rate is high. All these red numbers, that's the unemployment rate. And I picked it right at the peak. And I said, hey, if you invest at the peak of the unemployment rate, in the next year after the peak, you're going to earn 18% in the stock market. By the way, if you buy stocks when the unemployment rate hits the low, 3.4% unemployment rate, you buy stocks, you lose 6.7% right there back in 1968. Guess what? Since 1948, you buy stocks when the unemployment rate's that low, you lose 2% on average. So when do you want to buy stocks? When things look great or when things look bad? And this is what's interesting about people these days, is that they've just decided that when things look bad, that they're going to be bad forever. Now, some people will say at this point, Westbury, well, the unemployment rate's not 10%. It's really 17%. So it's really up here. This is what we call the U6 unemployment rate. All right? You've heard this, right? Actually, there's one guy out there that says, no, it's not even 17, it's 22%. All right? Because once you stop looking for a job for a full year, they don't count you at all. And there's an economist out there who goes, that's not right. I'm like, well, how long do you want us to count people? I mean, we could count everybody that's not working. See, what happens here is this is the unemployment rate. This is the regular one. This is 9.6% right here. It's high. We went from 4.4 to 9.6. But then there's this other thing. It's called marginally attached workers. We add. If you have a part-time job and you want to work full-time, and when you tell the interviewer that, then you get counted. If you quit looking for a job because you're bummed out, you can't find one, you're counted. So what we do is we knock on your door and we say, hey, do you have a job or not? And you say yes or no. If you say no, you say, are you looking for a job? And that's when the guy says, look, Sonny, I'm 92. Why do I want a job? Okay, you don't count. All right, but if you say, no, I quit looking for a job, and then Robert Reich is the one who dreamed this thing up, by the way, under Bill Clinton. The reason it starts in 1994, it was the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Robert Reich decided that we ought to ask about people's feelings. Well, how do you feel about that? All right? Well, I gave up. I'm disappointed. And so what happens is that we count. Now, I want you to take a look at this green line. That's the regular unemployment rate. And then this red line, that's the U6. That's the 17%. Guess what? If you tell me the regular unemployment rate, the real one, all I have to do is take 1.8 times that number, and I'll give you the U6 one. Now, sometimes it's 1.72 and sometimes it's 1.83, but on average it's 1.8. So it's always higher. So here, when the unemployment rate was 4.4, we were at almost 8. So why do we look at this thing? It doesn't help us. We went from 8 to 17. This one went from 4 to 10. I mean, you want to look at this just because it makes you feel worse? It doesn't give us any new information. Now, it may help win an election, and this is where I want to really come down on this today. You have to separate your politics from your economics. We have a war to fight, a political war to fight. But that doesn't mean that there's no opportunity, or that there's a scorched earth, and that you got to move to the hills with high-powered weapons and canned goods. All right? The point I'm getting to here is, let me ask you a question. How many of you, if I ask you, is Obama better or worse than you thought he would be? Let's hear for worse. All right, yeah. Now, anybody who didn't raise their hand, I assume in this room you're saying, he's exactly what I thought he would be. You're probably there, right? You read all his speeches. So here's my question. He's worse than you thought he would be. Worse. Me too. So you go back to January 19th. When was this date? When was the inaugural? January 19th, 2009. And he's taken the oath of office. And now you know. So you can see into the future. He's going to be worse than you think. Right then, he's worse. So all your worst dreams are coming true. Do you buy stocks or do you sell stocks? See, if you went short stocks, you would have had your face ripped off. That's a highly technical investment term. You just had your face ripped off. You were wrong about the stock market. You were right about politics. You were right about the size of government, but you were wrong about the stock market. And so what I'm getting to here is that we have to choose to separate these things at least a little bit. I want to show you this chart just because it'll blow your mind. This is personal consumption. This is all of us in the nation, how much we spend. Okay? Now you can see here's the peak, and then we had the panic. This is late 08, Lehman Brothers failed, TARP gets passed, all this stuff. We panic. And now guess what? Consumption is now at an all-time high. Americans as a whole have never consumed more than they are doing right now, ever. If you watch CNBC, do you believe this? In fact, I heard somebody yell, liar, that's not true. That's a lying piece of data. By the way, I gotta, when I tell people who think that, you know how many statisticians in Washington it takes to put this thing together? I mean, thousands. And I'm not kidding. And just for the record, I want tomorrow when you're just sitting around, like you get a spare moment, Call up somebody in Washington, whatever you want. You know, it's like, call up the person who does tomato prices for the producer price index. By the way, they're waiting for your call. All right? They would love to hear from you. And you will quickly find out that they're bored statisticians. They don't have a political bone in their body. And all of those people add up to this number. So the price of tomatoes is in here, and somebody who counts how many tomatoes we ship, and how many we import, and all those things, and all of that stuff adds up. There's no way you can lie about this if you're in Washington. Because it's made up of thousands of people who literally... By the way, the guy who's doing the tomatoes for the PPI, he wants to move up to onions. And so when you think about this stuff, this blows people's minds because they don't believe it. But it's true. Corporate profits are about to hit an all-time record in the United States. All-time record. Corporations have lots of cash, yes. They've also been investing too. But it's because they're so profitable today. Now, I want to close up, and I know Hugh's ready to get at me, but I want to close up with this. And I want to say we are controlled, I believe, by long dead mathematicians. Now you go, what? You ever heard of a guy named Edward Lorenz? Edward Lorenz in 1952 wrote a book about chaos theory. Now most of us, I happen to be a math major in the early 80s, so I heard about chaos theory way back then, but most average people, intelligent people, didn't really hear about chaos theory until like the 90s. You know, and what you really heard, most of us heard was this little story. Remember that a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and there's a tornado in Wichita. Right? That's what you heard. That's chaos theory. Everything's kind of interconnected. And the minute that butterfly flaps, everything changes. And you know what else is linked to this is the black swan. Yeah. All right? These black swans that are going to come and get us. And all this is linked. This is all chaos theory. This is all about the tails. You know, there's a bell-shaped curve, and it's these things that can't happen, right? Every swan is white, can't have a black one until we do. They can't happen. So house prices will never go down until they do. All right? And so the thing is that we are all walking around terrified that we're going to walk around a corner and get pecked to death by a black swan. Ken Rogoff is the chief economist at the IMF. He wrote a piece in the Financial Times not long ago where he said the subprime crisis, the flash crash, and the BP oil spill all show that the world's getting out of control. That technology is moving too fast for us to handle it. That we need more government. You know, he's one of those guys. But you know what? A lot of people in this room think the same thing. Maybe they don't want more government, but they sure believe things are out of control. You know, butterflies are flapping somewhere and it's going to get me. I actually, when I was thinking about this, I called my office from the road. Forget where I was driving. I said, guys, I have 2 young, awesome research assistants. And I'm like, how many times do butterflies flap their wings every day? And so you should see the email I got back. Well, there's 6 quintillion insects, and 12% are of the butterfly type, and some are flap their wings 3 and 20 times a minute, and 12 sextillion butterfly flaps is the best we can estimate. Right? And I emailed back, I'm like, by the way, sextillion has 19 zeros. So I wrote back, which flap should I worry about? Because I want you to think about this for a second. I mean, seriously. Butterflies have been flapping their wings since God put them on Earth. Tornadoes have been happening. Hurricanes have been happening. Sometimes your bus is late, sometimes it's early. Sometimes your plane's on time, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you spill coffee on your newspaper, sometimes you don't. Are you really telling me that we're sitting around nervous that all these things are, it's out of control? I mean, because when I really think about this, why are black swans always negative? Why are we all sitting around worried about a negative thing? Because isn't there things that are positive that we can count on? Like, by the way, the biggest black swan ever in the history of the world, well, probably Jesus Christ, but let's leave that aside for a second. In the economics of the world is America. It's America. I mean, do you know anything about the history of economics? 2,000 years, we got 1,800 years where nothing happened. In the year 1800, the average lifespan of an individual in the world was 36 years. Half of us wouldn't be here if we still lived like we did in 1800. So literally, it was almost like nothing happened. You know, things change. We changed, you know, we put cowboy hats on instead of sarongs or whatever the deal is. But basically, our lifestyle, our living standards were not much different in the mid-1700s than they were at the time of Christ's birth. All right? And so when you think about that, here's the way I kind of think of it. This is a black swan. Remember, it's what I'm talking about. A black swan, an unbelievable Six Sigma tail event. So your buddy Joe is in the outhouse, 1750. And you scream over the top, "Hey Joe, 200 years, you're going to be able to do that at 41,000 feet." And Joe was going to say, "You're crazy, go back to the saloon." Because see, Joe knew about history. He wasn't dumb. He knew what his grandfather and his father and his great-grandfather had done and how they tilled the fields and how they farmed. And he did it the same way. Sure, the grandfather had added the addition to the house and he added another one and they they whitewashed it or they fixed this or that and they had built up a few assets over the years, but they still did things the same way. So for him to imagine anything like what we have today was impossible. Impossible. He didn't even have science fiction back then. It wasn't until we really started rolling with science that we got science fiction. So back then they were just, in fact, his great-grandfather had 39 bushels per acre, in 1612, and he was trying to beat him still. And so when you really think about black swans, when I look at this, what I keep saying to myself is, this is the most amazing black swan ever. And it's not dead. In fact, November, we're going to win it back. All right? And so, and that's the thing that I keep coming back to is yes, things are bad today. Unemployment's high. Government has grown like crazy. But we have to fight that. But at the same time, remain optimistic. Now, I know that fighting it and yelling at Obama and telling everybody it's his fault is a winning strategy sometimes. And I'm not saying that we can't do that. But it'd be fine. Go tell everybody the economy's bad over here and invest over there. Because then you'd be really smart. And what I really want to do is convince people not to run scared like this whole thing's about to come collapsing down, because it's not. In the end, there really is something to believe in. And so, I have a couple more charts, and you can come grab me anytime you want to. I want to show you this one. The one thing I believe about the collapse that we just lived through is it's the first panic we have had in 100 years. The last real panic that we had was in 1906, 07, 08, and that was after the San Francisco earthquake. You go back and you read the books and nobody really knows why it happened or how the panic, we know what started it, but we're trying to figure out what happened exactly. And it lasted about a year, and if you look at this, that's the blue line. That's the stock market, and I started it in January of 1906. This one, the red line, is today. It starts in April of 07. And I made this chart back right about here. Now, I want to tell you that I made this chart kind of look like this, right to here. There is no way in my right mind that I thought we would mirror it. I don't believe history repeats. I think Mark Twain was right, history rhymes. It doesn't repeat. Okay? And so it's kind of uncanny. It's scary almost. And I'm not trying to say, oh, we're going up to here. But what I'm saying is that when panics end, they end. And I know everybody thinks this was the worst thing ever in history, but it wasn't. And I could talk for half an hour on that, about why it wasn't as bad as everyone seems to think it was. All right? Yes, we're going to lose 400 banks, but did you know in the 80s and 90s we lost 2,800 banks? I mean, you know, it's like we've lived through worse times before. And so what I want you to do is buck up and smell the roses rather than falling into the trap of believing everything's about to end. Because this, after all, this is America. And I trust it. Thanks very much.